In the colonial wars of the 18th and 19th centuries, European armies often marched through hostile terrain with absolute confidence. They carried advanced weaponry, strict discipline, and an unshakable belief in their own tactical superiority. Yet the historical record reveals a recurring pattern of failure. Time and again, highly trained commanders leading superior forces marched their men directly into catastrophic, easily avoidable defeats. These conflicts often centered on the assault of fortified settlements, defensive structures held by local forces. In these sieges, the attacking European empires almost always held the advantage in firepower and numbers. Danger arose from an information vacuum, a total lack of knowledge about the enemy. An attacking army often operated on assumptions, remaining blind to the physical reality of a fort's actual defenses. When we examine the most devastating defeats in these colonial sieges, the evidence points toward a single cause: the overconfidence of the men in charge. In 1758, Major Grant led a force of 800 British soldiers, including Highlanders and Virginians, toward the French settlement of Fort Duquesne on the Ohio River. Exactly 1 century later, near the end of the Indian Mutiny in 1858, Sir Colin Campbell selected Brigadier Walpole to lead a strong British column into the heart of a rebellion. This map of the Northwest provinces shows the Rohilkhand region. Walpole was ordered here to pursue rebel leader Bahadur Khan. Though brave, his own officers described him as an obstinate blunderer, someone who stubbornly repeats mistakes, and a great dolt. When complex expeditions are led by such rigid personalities, accurate intelligence is often viewed as a threat to their authority. For these commanders, ego often mattered more than survival. Major Grant reached a point just half a mile from Fort Duquesne and stopped to reconnoitre, the military term for scouting the area to gather information. Grant threw away his numerical advantage. He fractured his force of 800 men into small sections, scattered across a wide area. He sent an officer's escort to sit before the gates, sketching the French defenses in plain sight of the enemy. Grant then ordered his drummers to beat the reveille, the loud morning wake-up call. The sound alerted the entire French garrison to his exact position. The gates of the fort swung open. French troops and their indigenous allies poured out, overrunning the sketching party and killing 300 of Grant's men. Major Grant himself was captured. Grant's defeat proves the danger of treating an armed enemy like a passive audience. His overconfidence turned a scouting mission into a massacre. 100 years later, in India, Brigadier Walpole's column of soldiers approached a small defensive structure known as Fort Ruya. A British soldier who had just escaped the fort arrived with vital information. He told Walpole the fort held only 200 men, and their leader, Nirpat Singh, intended to surrender after a brief symbolic fight. Walpole dismissed this first-hand report as nonsense. Without any evidence, he decided the enemy garrison actually numbered 1,500 men. He refused to scout the perimeter of the fort, ignoring the dense jungle that protected its sides. A basic survey would have revealed a massive weakness. While the front walls were high and thick, the wall at the rear was so low that a child could have climbed over it. Walpole chose to ignore the physical reality of the fort. By relying on his own paranoid assumptions, he guaranteed a disaster before the first shot was fired. Nirpat Singh had planned to give up the fort, but the sight of British troops marching in dense masses toward his strongest walls changed his mind. As the British forces attacked the strongest defenses, the garrison opened fire. Over 100 British soldiers were shot down in a matter of minutes. This engraving records the chaos of the assault, which claimed the life of the popular Highlander brigadier, Adrian Hope. Faced with resistance, Walpole panicked and ordered a retreat. His own men openly cursed him as a coward and a fool. That night, Nirpat Singh and his 200 men simply walked out of the fort under the cover of darkness. Walpole occupied an empty building the following morning, 1 day too late. Walpole's insistence on a frontal assault against the fort's strongest point resulted in 100 needless deaths, turning a peaceful surrender into a bloody defeat. The dates, the casualty counts, and the tactical movements are documented facts. However, the exact thoughts of these commanders remain a mystery. To understand why men like Grant and Walpole lost their wits, historians rely on the diaries and letters of the officers who survived them, records filled with the anger of men led by blunderers. These records suggest a sobering conclusion. The most impenetrable defense a fortress can ever have is the unchecked ego of the commander attacking it. If these disasters are born from a willful refusal to acknowledge the facts, we must ask, how many other historical defeats were decided by a leader's ego before the first shot was ever fired?